Hi everyone, my name is Gabriele and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Nottingham. With this short video, I want to tell you a bit about my job market paper, which is titled Skills, Distortions and the Labor Market Outcomes of Immigrants Across Space. So let me give you a brief introduction to this paper. So we know that there are large flows of people who migrate from one country to another, and that immigration to high-income countries is especially large. And we know that immigrants who move from their countries to high-income countries tend to be paid about 13% less than native workers. We also know that those immigrants choose to live more than native workers in big and expensive cities. And we know that big cities pay large premium on earnings to their workers. The literature, in fact, has shown that part of the city size earnings premium is explained by high returns to working in cognitive occupations in big cities. However, we know little about immigrants' labor market outcomes and how they vary across space, and also how the labor market outcomes of immigrants compare to those of native workers. So with this paper, I'm going to study the geography of labor market outcomes of immigrant workers and its implications on spatial inequalities. To give you more details, in this paper, I use US microdata from the American Community Survey to document a set of stylized facts. In the first fact, I show that US natives receive earnings premium by working in big cities, while immigrant workers do not. Then, in the second fact, I dig more into the flat relationship between nominal earnings and size of US cities for US immigrants, and I document that higher earnings in big cities are associated with the GDP per capita in the country of origin of immigrants. And finally, with the third fact, I document something related to the spatial distribution of workers across cities and occupations. In particular, I document that while natives and immigrants from rich countries work more in cognitive occupation, especially when they live in big cities, immigrants from low-income countries, at the opposite, tend to work more in occupations not intensive in cognitive tasks. However, relative to the first two groups of workers, immigrants from low-income countries tend to live more in big cities. Then I use these facts and I interpret this evidence to build a spatial equilibrium model in which cities differ in terms of production technologies and the supply of housing that are allowed to be endogenously determined within the model. In this economy, workers from different origins differ in their human capital and tastes for cities and occupations. Immigrant workers are also subject to distortions that are specific to cities and occupations. What do I mean by that? So I model these distortions as wedges on earnings and on the labor supply. Wedges on earnings can be interpreted as a form of labor market discrimination, for example, due to the undocumented status of immigrant workers, or also to the lack of economic assimilation of immigrant workers. Wedges on labor supply, at the same time, distort the allocation of these workers across cities and occupations. These wedges can be thought as barriers that immigrants face due to the lack of licensing to perform an occupation in which they would have been more productive. Then, once I build the model, I use and estimate the model, I use it as a laboratory to study the role of human capital and distortions to explain spatial differences in earnings and to quantify the effects of the sources of earnings inequality on the real output per capita. Finally, as a last exercise, I simulate two immigration policies to evaluate the implication of immigration inflows on prices and nominal output. So let me give you a preview of the results. So first of all, spatial inequality between immigrants and natives is mostly explained by labor market distortions. In fact, without distortions on earnings, there would be more immigrants from low-income countries working cognitive occupations. Also, those occupations are the most paid, especially in big cities. and without distortions and differences in human capital, the US real output per capita would be higher by 1.6%. And within the model framework, distortions to the labor supply and earnings explain 70% of this change in real output per capita. Finally, in the last exercise, I simulate a change in the immigration policy that consists of an increase in the immigrant population by 1 percentage point. I then look at the effects on nominal output per capita, prices, and real output per capita. So when I simulate an increase of 1 percentage point in the share of immigrants without college, there is not much of a change in nominal output per capita. But prices increase, since now there are more workers in the economy demanding for units of housing and final good. In this case, the real output per capita decreases by 0.5%. When I simulate an increase of 1 percentage point in the share of immigrants with college, instead, the nominal output per capita increases by about 0.5%. These workers are more productive, but the higher productivity of these workers is overcome by a large increase in prices. In fact, they earn more, and so they demand and consume more of the final good and housing. Therefore, the overall effect, the large effect on prices, implies that real output per capita decreases by 0.25%. So if you're interested in knowing more details about the paper, please visit my website and check for the draft of the paper. Thank you.